You're either going to throw your life away and do only this, selfishly, self-centeredly pursue excellence in some field, because that's what it takes. The things that normal people do to feel good. If you want to be excellent, you can't do those things.
Hey, welcome to the Mark Halley Show. I'll tell you what, we got a great guest today. His name's Jason Ricci. Jason is a world-renowned harmonica player. So why don't you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about you as a world-renowned harmonica player.
Thanks, Mark. It's kind of like being a world-renowned ping pong player. There's like, there's like 5,000 people in the whole planet that go crazy over you,
Yeah, but they're passionate, what the hell? At least you got them passionate,
They're really passionate, yeah.
Well, they
like
are.
Stalker passionate.
That's pretty cool, Yeah, when you see him, it's like, whoa, back up a touch there, wise guy, You may like you. I don't know if I like you. You may like me. I don't know if I like you. But hey, so anyway, I was thinking about this. I listened to your whole podcast on Dopey, and I want to kind of slide a little bit away from that because I think there's some cool, pertinent subjects that are would be more interesting. So first off, you become what we call world renowned, but there's some. I imagine there's some steps between what you would consider yourself an accomplished harmonica guy up into the point where you become world renowned. And what are they? What are the little landmarks that you lay down?
It was just a lot of hard work. That was it. And obviously practicing and, and listening and refining what you do, but then the business end of it, just never giving up, never taking no for an answer. And probably also like having an addictive personality.
Yeah, I know that one.
And, there's probably there was a period of sobriety between 1998 and 2010 where one might label that like a dry drunk or human power sobriety.
Yeah.
So I was staying sober for the sole purpose of the career.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so while that was something that would end up not working out for me, I got a lot done during that time period. Yeah.
So you laid down. But what would be, like a lot of us, like say for me, I sold bags, hardcore, just kissing ass and shaking hands, right? Grinding it. And for you, at some point when you're grinding it, something happens and you kind of go, wow, I made it over a hump. Like, what do you think would be that? Maybe give us an insight into where that or another hump would be.
Yeah, I think there's always another one, and I try not to put too much value on defining myself by my occupation or by this whatever it is I've decided success looks like in that occupation. The reason for that is because every time I have made it over one of those humps, it lasts as long as it hit a crack.
Yeah.
And then I'm looking at the next one, or if I won this award, how come that guy got 2?
Yeah.
So I don't do that. I as a matter of fact, probably when something happens positive in my life in terms as it's related to my career, like some kind of accolade or a record deal or a new agency that promises to put us out there more, whatever it is, I actually have the opposite reaction. I'm like, whoa, like, be careful. Like, don't put too much stock in this. And not because I'm afraid it won't work out. I'm more scared of it working out.
Yeah, because that could send you off the beam,
Yeah. Even if it wasn't into like something that had to do with drugs or alcohol, but just spiritually, not being connected to the things that really matter.
Yeah. I mean, you can get, I think any of us, get lost in, what people on the outside think you are versus this when you're digging, I guess it's the chase that turns you on, which is satisfying something in you that maybe is ill defined. But you're chasing this thing, and the minute you hit it, it's almost like, hey, the fun is that kind of the fun's gone. I got to find the next one.
I agree, and I try not to do that anymore for very
Yeah.
long anyway.
Here you are. I know you've been very open about gay and queer and so on, and now here you are finding yourself chilling with blues people, and that's not exactly the exact place you want to be, at least
No,
in my opinion or my
no,
observation. So
no, you're
so
dead on.
yeah, so you're drawn to these people, and I'm presuming well knowing this is probably a direction that's not going to be the most, you're going to be less widely accepted.
Well, I mean, when I came out, I initially came out as gay, just because I wasn't like kissing girls.
Uh-huh.
I was still attracted to them, but I wasn't. I didn't like really see like like holding hands and watching movies and playing houses like that was gonna work out. So like the more really like intimate or romantic feelings I had were from men. And
Uh-huh.
I never thought that I would ever really seriously date a woman ever again. I thought there was a possibility I might sleep with a woman again,
Yeah, yeah.
but never. But so I came out as gay, and then of course I ended up marrying
Yeah, I
a
read
woman.
that. Yeah, I
Yeah,
read that, and I'm like, wait a minute, because I read her name, and I'm like, it's Caitlin, isn't it?
yeah, it's not a
And I'm
guy.
like, yeah, I'm like, wait a
It's
minute,
not a really femme boy named Caitlin. Yeah,
And then I think
but
in one of your videos, one of your YouTubes, I saw her in the background. And I'm like, oh, so okay, so now, all right. So I got it put together. But going into, I mean, most of the, I know you at one point made a move to Memphis. Do you come out down there, or you kind of keep it on the low down?
it's like years. I think in '95 when I moved to Memphis, I wasn't even aware that that's I mean, I knew I was bisexual, but I
Yeah.
wasn't like so it was years later, and when I but to answer your initial question, like when I first came out, which was like around 2001 or so, I was so naive that I mean, I knew I was gonna lose some gigs,
Mm-hmm.
but I actually thought like it might be interesting enough to the world
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
I might get some gigs.
Yeah. Yeah. No. No.
Which
It's like
which was really naive. It was
yeah.
really naive.
Well, it's like that guy. He was the big hot shot in football, Carl Nassib. I don't know if you remember him, defensive
Yeah.
tackle for hot shot for the Cleveland Browns and everything. And he came out, and it was like, whoa, I don't know if that's right, and obviously, given his amazing skill set, he got a little bit of a, oh, it's okay. You can smoke your vape in front of me. I'm not going to be terribly
No way. Alright.
offended. Bring it. Yeah, just what I want. You're like blowing it off to the side. I'm like, oh, fuck that.
I got the big sucker too, man.
oh, you got the boiler. I do the zins.
Yeah.
I've been, I went from smokes to dip to cigars, and then I'm inhaling cigars. Then I chewed Nicorette for like 20 years as my cessation plan. Then I moved over to Zins. So that's about the best I can do with staying away from nicotine. But anyway, so when you get down to Memphis, you're obviously a young guy banging around, and you started getting gigs and gaining some notoriety. On what, who were some? I mean, you had your role models, but it's a whole different thing to have role models and then start to be somebody like, hey, let this guy get on stage and be the performer that he has worked so hard to be. And
I moved there was another harmonica player that I saw one time passing through Memphis. Um,
mm-hmm,
and, I I moved there to be around that guy.
mm-hmm,
His name was Pat Ramsey.
okay,
And, so I was already, like, getting kinda good.
mm-hmm,
Like, I was only in Memphis a week when I won a blues contest
oh,
in
cool,
Helena, Arkansas, and I beat some pretty popular people that, were one of whom was Michael Burks, who became a really great, or was a really great blues guitar player. But anyway, I probably shouldn't have won that, but I did. And so I was already kind of getting there, like, so it wasn't a big deal of like, oh, how do we let this guy on stage? I had been on stages before. I started really, really young. I was 21 when I moved to Memphis, or 20, turned, no, 21. And, and when I got there, I had been playing since I was like 13,
Yeah, I remember. Yeah, yeah.
seriously playing for 13. So, almost a decade under my belt of trying to learn this thing.
And where are you banging around playing that? In your garage or in your basement or
Mi-
you you
No,
know?
yeah, I mean, initially and in the car and stuff, but then on stages in Maine and on stages in the Northwest. And by that time, had sat in with some pretty heavy cats. I was offered a job, but that I didn't take, with Sam Lay, who was Muddy Waters and Paul Butterfield's drummer.
Well, right on.
And so I was, I wasn't, it wasn't just like this crazy. I mean, it's a crazy dream period to have, regardless of your ability level, but there was certainly reason to believe that it was obtainable.
Well, so now here's a flashback. I was listening to you being like a little skateboard, whatever knucklehead, and you're listening
Still am.
to. Okay, good. Well, you're listening to. Let me get this right. Milkmen, Ghazi, Black Flag. So I go and I turn all those guys on. But so I'm thinking to myself, how the hell do the milkmen get to the harmonica? And in my head, I'm kind of like, or was that just being a little knucklehead banging around on a skateboard? Or it just hit me as funny or interesting.
No, I mean, culturally, I came up around that stuff too. And skateboard culture and punk rock have always mixed, and I like the Clash too. And so bands like the Dead Kennedys and the Dead
Yeah,
Milkmen and
yeah, yeah,
Fugazi and the Misfits and the Ramones and the Sex Pistols and Seven
yeah, yeah,
Seconds
yeah,
and all that stuff was just part of my culture. It was in the videos. It was stuff that my friends were bringing over.
yeah.
Those people looked and acted like me. But I got into harmonica for fun. I was in a punk band and I was the singer. And some of the other guys in the band started singing. So I was getting benched. So I got the harmonica just to do something.
Yeah.
And then because I had a guitar teacher at the time, and he played harmonica, and I asked him one day if he could teach me some, and he did. And he gave me a cassette tape, and he said, "Hey, look, if you want to really get into harmonica, you need to listen to blues music." And my heart sank. I didn't want to hear that. I
Yeah.
didn't want to hear a bunch of old black guys, and anyway, what happened was I ended up falling in love with it. And my mother was a blues fan and took me to shows in Maine. I saw James Cotton and Buckwheat Zydeco and all kinds of Charlie Musselwhite and all these great bands. And slowly but surely, I stopped like really listening to a lot of the punk stuff, and I kind of became this, sort of obsessed with blues and playing catch up. And I even though I liked punk and stuff, I also like Janis Joplin and Jimi Hendrix and stuff. So it wasn't too much of a stretch for me once I really got into it, and I started to, I heard Muddy Waters and Little Walter and Buddy Guy and BB King and stuff. It was just amazing. I was like, wow, this is where those people, tried to get it from. And it was just, I was obsessed. And that obsession lasted a really, really, really long time. I would say it's still there to a degree. I'm more well-rounded today. I,
Hmm.
I listen to blues and jazz and classical, and I still throw on some Pixies
Yeah.
and
Yeah. Yeah.
breeders every now and then. Last night, my wife and I heard a new song from the Yeah Yeah Yeahs that was just blew me out of the water. Right. So
Really?
like, it's still, I just love all music. Right. Right. But I had to immerse myself in blues culture and black culture if I wanted a shot at really playing this, because I don't think it should be taken lightly, that the fact that where blues and jazz music come from, and
Hmm.
it comes from oppression, and it's
Yeah.
black music. And so I that going to Memphis was just part of the beginning of immersing myself in black culture. And although Pat wasn't black, it wasn't long after that before I was playing with Junior Kimbrough and R.L. Burnside. And not only that, living with them,
Hmm.
in their homes, and not seeing another white person except at shows
Yeah.
for sometimes 6 months at a time,
So
or more.
these guys are immersing you in the game. So now it's
I
almost
mean,
like you're not leaving the stage and going hanging out with buddies. You're leaving the stage and going and hanging out with professionals.
I don't know if you would call them professionals. They're certainly considered that today. When I was playing with RL and Junior, those guys weren't popular like they are now. It took bands like the Black Keys and the North Mississippi All Stars and the White Stripes to put those bands on the map. And
Okay.
so it really wasn't until Junior had already died and RL had cut the punk record with John
Okay.
Spencer, that record made it into Julia Roberts movies, and they started remixing stuff and adding like hip hop beats. It wasn't until that happened that those guys became popular. But
Hmm.
but even in their popularity, they were still dirt poor with RL had 13 kids to feed. Um, and yeah, and that with a chain and a lock around his refrigerator and mattresses on every room in the floor, and that just trying to keep the car running and everything. So those guys didn't enjoy the success that they absolutely should have.
So you start now. If I got it right, you're in Memphis, and then you end up in New Orleans. Was that one of the steps that you
It
took?
Eventually, that's where I am now. I In between Memphis, I lived in Nashville, Florida, North Carolina, and then now here.
Hmm. So a little bit of moving about. Was that
Yep,
and that was because of your wonderful lifestyle?
I was following work to Nashville. Florida was for rehab and then ultimately jail.
Okay. Good.
North
Good.
Carolina was to work at a rehab.
Oh, cool.
Um, Nashville again was a touring gig, my first real touring gig. So there you go. There's a hump that you
Okay.
were
All right.
talking about earlier. Like my first time getting in a van and playing more than just the 3 or 4 states that were around me, right? Like
Yeah.
going to Washington, to San Francisco, you know what I mean? Being on TV, that kind of
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, then I start seeing you popping up. I was tracing your different YouTubes and all that kind of stuff, and started to see at one point. In fact, I still think you do it. Some training.
Every single Friday. Every
Oh, do you
Friday,
do?
there's a new video. I still teach. I have a Patreon channel where I teach more than
Hmm.
just on YouTube, but it's a humongous part of my life, and very fortunately, a great part of my income.
Cool.
YouTube has been game changing. The money that Google pays is pretty good, but what compared to like Spotify or any of these other platforms, but 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 funneling people to Patreon is what allows me to have an amount of income worth, because I put in 8 to 12 hours a week of video editing. You know,
Wow. Yeah. No, I know for this show, it's no small task putting it
no,
together. You know,
no, you get better at it, you get
yeah.
faster at it as time goes, but boy, yeah.
It looks like a grinder. And then so your audience, yeah. So your audience out there is just a bunch of dudes who want to learn how. So are you physically training some, or like people calling in saying, "Hey, I want to do one-on-one stuff"?
Yeah, I do that too. I'm trying to do less of it just because I'm like messing up my regular business. Like my touring schedule is pretty demanding and I need to be on top of it. I need to make sure that we have the Airbnbs and the hotels booked and the distances between drives figured out and the band rehearsed and stay on the agent to make sure that they're booking a tour after the one that we're on. You know what I mean? So if I'm teaching too much, I'm spreading myself thin. So I try to
Yeah.
try to keep it. I'm trying to keep it about trying to strike a balance. With
Oh,
kind of but in this day and age, as a musician, you got to have a few hustles.
yeah,
There's
yeah,
no there you really can't make unless you're one of the very few that can make a living from just touring.
yeah.
It's really, really hard, especially post-COVID, the with all so many venues shutting down and people going out less and less.
Yeah. So and then it must be hard when like you get in front of some. I'm sure you're getting in front of a crowd and they're just not liking it. They're just like, yeah, we think he sucks and we think he's a dick.
I
I mean,
love that. It doesn't happen very often, but I love that. It's
yeah,
such a incredible challenge for me, and that's where sincerity comes into play.
yeah,
Because if people don't like something, if they can see that you're coming from a real place, even
yeah.
if they don't like it, it's really hard for them to stay not liking it. Or they can say, "Well, it's not the type of music for me, but I can tell that guy is really serious about it."
Well, no, you
So,
you come across that way. You're all in, and it probably ties into your, I think overloading yourself, and in a way, this first off, overloading yourself is just being an addict. I do it all the time. Give me 70 things to do, and I think I can probably do 30, and I'm trying to do 70. And before I know it, I'm emotionally just off the freaking, now I'm just, in this, on my 37th time in a therapist, and I'm hanging out with psychiatrists, and I'm trying to, what's wrong with me? So I think that's one. And then when somebody attacks you, what I think creates your authenticity is it's this, oh my God, I am that bad dude I thought I was, and now I have to just strip myself clean and just be me, and hope I can,
yeah.
and let that come through.
I try to respond just really lovingly. Like, I have to pause, of course. I mean, everybody, when you're putting yourself out there in anything, whether it's through the podcast or music or art or culinary arts or carpentry for that matter, people are gonna get on you. And, so I just try to pause for a minute and then think of, like, the kindest, most loving, honest thing that I can say back, you know?
Yeah, yeah.
That seems to neutralize
Yeah, yeah.
any anger. If I can do that, or how about this, say nothing?
Just shut up. Yeah. Silence is, as a guy who, here's the thing, here's the playback on you. As I sold all my life, and there's two things that they say in selling is the thing that puts somebody off the most is you being authentic because they don't see it. Everybody who comes in and sells is, like, hi, I sell bags and I am a really great guy. And but if you just come in there and you're like, hey man, I think I do a good thing, and I don't screw you, and I want just this pure authenticity that you come to learn, and that's a hard thing to learn. And the other thing to learn is just getting rejected and kind of hanging on to a sense that somehow the cream's going to rise to the top. I don't know how, but if you lose faith in that, you're kind of like, hey, kind of give up the game. If you just think it's a dark, mean, whatever world, well, then it's going to be dark and mean.
I agree.
You know,
Yeah. I mean, so much of this last 5 years of this time getting sober has been entirely about shifting my perspective and really watching what I think and
yeah,
how I
yeah.
talk to myself inside my own head.
Well, that there lies the battle. Our brains. Mine's a great thing, but man, when it turns on me, it turns nasty. How do you fight that off? And
I pray.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, that's I pray too. I'm pretty sure you're born again. I'm not. I am not that, but I am born again through my recovery. And
Absolutely.
30,
Absolutely.
yeah, 37 years of doing that.
I
You,
saw that.
yeah, yeah,
Yep.
you learn. I always joke around that, you learn that now when you've been clean that long, when you're an asshole, it's just because you're an asshole. You can't say, you can't say, oh dear, I shouldn't have done that.
Or my alcoholism.
Yeah, nobody wants to say, oh, that's my disease,
Yeah,
Everybody's like,
I love that you said that.
Yeah,
I love that you said that.
yeah, and other people are like, yeah, well, no, here's the situation. You're a dick. And, and then you
Yeah.
go, well, I'm not really a dick. And they're like, no, no, no. you are a dick when it comes
Right.
to the way you handled that, or like with my wife, I can't tell you the number of times where I'm like, fuck this. I got 5 kids and I'm like, fuck her. I don't need the kids. I'm out of here. Get in my car. And I'm like 3 blocks down the road and I'm like, so where am I going to go? And it's usually my pride, some resentment, where
Yeah, yeah.
it's just like, suck it up, go back there. And, you got to fold that tent or life can't go on. You just got to fold it up. But now, how does that tie into you? Now, you're out on the road and you're touring with guys. Now, that's got to be a challenging situation.
Right. Luckily, I've had mostly guys that I've known for a while, and we when we have to replace somebody, and it's usually, nowadays that's usually because of health or somebody died.
Mm-hmm.
We lost our drummer last year. We found him dead on the road.
Mm-hmm.
Just natural causes.
Mm.
But but I pick the guys based on their personality first and how they interact with each other, and then musically second. Like
Yeah.
yeah, because of the amount of time that we spend together, and we're still at a place where it's not uncommon for us on a tour to have, a 31-hour drive home or a 20-hour
Yeah.
drive
Yeah.
home,
Yeah. I
a
would think so.
20-hour drive to the first gig, sometimes even still sharing a room,
Mm.
with each other.
Mm.
So it's really important that people get along.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
and I honestly believe even the lack of technical ability, it's made up for the way the audience hears a band that's cohesive, that loves each other. If the
Yeah.
band loves each other, I think the music is better, even if one guy's not as good as somebody else that you could get. That is a better musician, but isn't gelling with the band. And we've certainly hired people, as subs that came out and did not have as good of an attitude as the rest of us about the gig, or had some kind of like ego situation going on that made it challenging.
What would be what you consider to be one of the things that you had to really work hard at to become, you know what I mean, like a newer level of a harmonica guy?
I've never stopped growing on my instrument. I can't explain the gratitude that I have for theory and and mathematics and geometry and the way that the universe is laid out and how that ties into music. I'm never without inspiration.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't matter my instrument. If the harmonica was taken away from me tomorrow, I could begin just getting the physical uh, coordination on another instrument, and I would be able to move everything I do in no time to another instrument. Additionally, I think it's the same for anybody out there that's involved in any kind of discipline, whether it's like martial arts or interviewing somebody,
Yeah.
that there's always something you can learn. And it's always a microcosm for it's the same things. It's discipline, it's showing up, it's learning from your mistakes, it's being present in the moment. It's all of the spiritual principles that we try to live our life by. We find that whenever we examine anything, any kind of vocation or art, we find the same things that are involved. I'm watching the show, or finished the new season of the show The Bear, which is about
Yeah. Yeah.
cooking.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and in the end of this season, he confronts this chef that was really mean to him, and,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I
eh
remember that. It was in like New York City, or he went somewhere to. He was like a prep cook, and this guy was just being a dick to him.
right, and in
I
the end of
think.
the season, he confronts him, and there's this, like, dichotomy that the guy says, like, "Look, like, I was a dick to you. Yeah, but look how you turned out. Like, you were an okay cook when you got here, and now look at you, and, you're either gonna throw your life away and do only this, selfishly, self-centeredly pursue excellence in some field, because that's what it takes. You have to shut out men, shut out women, shut out going out at night, watching movies, the things that normal people do to feel good. If you want to be excellent, you can't do those things.
You're speaking right down my line because I'm 26 and I'm clean. So what job do I get? Selling bags. Okay, bags. BAGS. This is bullshit. I'm selling bags. But I just said I'm going to get my oars in the water. I'm going to bust my balls. And within about 2 to 3 years, it's you know, Katie bar the door. Mark is at it. It becomes no longer what I'm selling. It is what I'm selling, but it's more me making me better. And it just
Yeah.
went on. It went on for 35 years. But one of the reasons I like doing this show is, to the younger people who listen to someone like you and me, is there's no easy road to get there. It has to be a passion. It can't be. I always say it's got to be here. It can't be here. And if it's here, you'll go wild banshee. And it was there for you, and that
It was, but I mean, but the other side of what that chef would experience, though, is that it is a very selfish and self-centered pursuit to do that, and it's also not healthy for people, and art does imitate life. So at some point, that has to sort of stop, and it has to be, and you have to kind of go, okay, like I've done the amount of technical work I can do. Now I have to put learning how to do what I just did in music with my relationship with my wife, right?
that's a
Like
hard
with
one.
the
That's
real
a hard one.
right.
You know.
Right. Right. And when we do that, then the music suddenly gets what it was missing before. It becomes informed on a spiritual level. And that's it's just such a fine, difficult line. And there's tons of times when I'm sitting here thinking I'm on the road and I'm thinking I'm doing it all wrong. I should be home in New Orleans. I should be with my wife and my cat. I should be helping more people in AA. I should be getting involved in some kind of a church or harm reduction program, something where I can make a real difference. This is complete bullshit. And then there's times when I'm doing all of that stuff and I'm thinking, you know what? If I was divorced her and stopped, going to so many meetings and doing all this, I could really, really excel. And like I could be the next John Coltrane. But here I am wasting my
Yeah,
life on caring about people.
yeah. No, they say that things, like for you maybe with the harmonica, that it's listening to you. It doesn't make sense what you're doing, but there's this thing inside you that just it can't be suppressed. For me, it was leaving on my own and trying to start my own business. It was dumb to do it.
Yeah, it's
I
dumb.
had 3 kids, and somebody say,
Yep.
"Oh, I don't want. I want. Oh, it'll give me more freedom." No, it won't.
Right.
I want to be rich.
No,
No, it
being your
won't.
own boss, you'll never stop working. Yeah.
Yeah, I want to be. Oh, I don't want to have to worry about the bank. Oh, you will.
More
And
never.
yeah,
Yep.
so on and on and on it goes. But what I want to do is for a moment here talk about, your upbringing and how much it influenced you. Now, you went into great length on that Dopey podcast. I mean, that was a great podcast. But on the other hand, it focused on that. But there were
Yeah,
some
it's
seminal events in your life that were like, wow, this shit was real. So tell us a little bit about that.
I mean, it was an unstable upbringing, and like in referring to Dopey, like I think it's a great podcast. It's very sensational, though.
Just touch on some of those things within your family, the dynamics that.
It was mental illness, depression, suicide attempts from my mother, multiple uh visits, to residential mental health treatment centers for my mother. Um, like so long periods of absence. Father not really in my life. Father involved in what do you call high profile court cases
Yeah, yeah.
where as both well, as the plaintiff mostly, but dealing with subjects like organized crime,
Yeah, I read about that.
drugs,
Yeah,
things like
yeah.
that. And then of the Elan School, which is now the subject of a documentary on Amazon called The Last Stop.
I listened to
Uh,
that. Give a rundown on Elon because that's a pretty crazy thing going on there, at least in my
well, it
opinion.
was, yeah. I mean, but I mean, the thing that I think is, and in no way am I defending what happened at Elan, or am in any way unsympathetic to those that would coin themselves survivors of that group, and I don't put that in quotes to take away from it. I'm saying that's the term they use, and
Mhm.
I would think for many of them that's probably accurate. But I will say this, that at the time, Elan was really the third ever treatment center for, a residential living environment treatment center for these kinds of issues, behavioral, drug and alcohol, that kind of stuff. Because before that, we had Synanon and Daytop. My father went through Daytop, which was based on Synanon, and then
What?
started
Okay,
Elan.
stop for a moment.
Yeah,
Dayton and what were they? What
Daytop,
was yeah?
Daytop.
What
Yeah.
was their methodology?
So it was, it was what they called at the time was confrontational therapy. I don't think, actually, I think that's what it's called now. I don't think they even, I don't know if they had a term for it, but it was like vast and heavy duty accountability. And sometimes that was taken too far, but it was mainly, I almost use the word perpetrated. That
Yeah,
might be an accurate word, but it was executed through group therapy, and also on frequent occasions through humiliation,
yeah.
dunce
I
caps,
listened to that, and
right. and, and
they're
and
really
now
going after it.
I went through a treatment center that was not far removed from that myself in the 90s, called the Renaissance Institute.
Hmm.
Kurt Cobain went through the same place, and
Wow.
and there were kids that killed themselves in there, and
Oh,
and they would kick people out, that people that had been flown in from other countries were kicked out for no reason, just to see how they would fare. And some of them overdosed, like on the streets of West Palm Beach, Florida. Right. And we were made to sit in groups together for sometimes, 15, 16 hours. People peed on themselves. You know what I mean? Stuff like that. Uh, I don't think, no, I think we had dunce caps at Elan at that time, right? Signs. If you got too buddy buddy with somebody, they might handcuff you to them for a few days. So
whoa.
they're in the shower, and you got your hand up while they're taking the shower. You're pooping, and they get in the shower and close the curtain while you poop, and that was all, that was still going on. So I'm not defending the actions that happened there, but I'm just saying that at that time, nobody knew how to deal with addiction. And I still would argue that we're having a hard time.
No, the rehab
It's
around
tough.
here, the rehab is around here that I work with and talk at, and you know is we had the general the whatever the gal who runs it, the operation manager, was on here, and her big point was that we have been designed around alcoholism. And one of the new things that community is trying to struggle with is, how do you handle what would be considered, while it's an addictive personality, it's a much more severe, psychiatric hit. When you're a kid, locked in on heroin or opiates or speed, or fentanyl, that's a different beast. And I do think the rehabs now are still floundering around how to answer that question.
There's a
That's
lot of questions. I mean, and in addition to multiple and potentially more deadly quicker, I guess
yeah,
that's the
yeah,
term.
yeah.
Yeah, substances, but I mean, issues of trauma, um, harm reduction is not being addressed. The rehabs have this model that, not all of them, but a lot of them have this model that's really antiquated, which is that the expectation is 100% abstinence from everything, and then, for the rest of your life. And then when you leave the treatment center, you're put in the hands of whatever 12-step program that's crammed down your throat
Yeah.
for the time that you're there. And very few treatment centers are addressing the individual and where they're at in their life. And not everybody is going to quit heroin and actually have a problem with marijuana. Not
Yeah.
It's just a fact. Some
Yeah.
people are going to go on to lead wonderfully successful lives. But when we shove this model down their throat that if you relapse on marijuana, you're now exempt from participating in the community that we call recovery.
I have a
Okay.
kid. I have a kid that I work with here, and same gig. He, drove his car and all the shit you do wrong, and so he's been clean for say 6 years, and he started getting high, and he admitted to me with all this guilt, and I said, look, man, I really don't care. The game is, are you lying your head down at night, and are you comfortable with your life? Because
Yeah.
who's drawing that line? But the thing he had a problem with is coming into the rooms and having to cough it up like, oh, I fucked up and I got to start over. And I said, well, don't say it. Fuck it. You know?
Yeah, it's tough. It's really, really tough. I mean, we're fortunate now that, like, okay, because on one hand, I'm 100% sober and abstinent from all substances other than caffeine and nicotine.
Oh, that's all
But
right.
so no mind altering substances for me, because that's what has worked for me. Okay. That being said, right, I value a room of other people that are doing exactly the same thing.
Yeah.
So I think we're fortunate now that there are more options: smart recovery,
Yeah. Yeah.
cognitive behavioral therapy,
Yep.
recovery dharma, and there are other places that people can go now. Unfortunately, not as plentiful
Yeah.
yet
Yeah.
as AA, where the word relapse isn't looked at the same way.
Yeah.
Okay, where where uh, where 100% abstinence isn't a requirement. But as a 12 stepper in AA, I do believe that what we're doing is the process of remaining abstinent from any mind altering substances for the point of growing spiritually.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
it started off as a problem, that because it was the solution to the problem. The problem was me and my relationship with the world or God, right? So once I've got that kind of in check, that the rest is just all about growing, and some of the things that you and I talked about at the beginning of the meeting. That's what we're trying to do. So maybe somebody smoking pot shouldn't be in the meeting. At the same time, who cares
Yeah.
if
Who
they're
gives a
there?
fuck?
Right,
Yeah,
right. And who am I?
I went
Yeah,
to a meeting once. This is great. I go to a meeting on a Sunday, which never happened to me, and the guy who is the secretary is hammered, right? So it's a Sunday, and he starts doing the whole thing. He's like, blah, 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 blah. And so I'm listening. I'm like, this is a new ride. And then he starts whining about, I just want a girlfriend. So, of course, people are starting to get pissed at him. And at the end of the meeting, I'm like, hey, man, it's a desire. Yeah, that's not what we want. But he's sitting here. Yeah, he's fucking it all up in our view. But rather here than sitting in the back of a cop car,
yeah,
and
yeah. But AA aside and 12-step programs aside, I just think that there needs to be more focus on clean needles, Narcan, treatment for hepatitis C, training for Narcan, drug testing places, safe injecting or smoking areas, keeping people out of prison, educating people on how to stay out of prison, how to stay disease free, and how to stay alive. And I think once if we can get more people staying alive longer, then they can make the decision later. What form of recovery do they want to do? Do they want to be completely abstinent, or do maybe they want to try smoking heroin instead of injecting it? And either one of those is a positive change. Okay. And that's what needs to happen in my after because I got sober in 98 for the first time, Mark. And
Hmm.
and since then, I can honestly say, and I'm quoting a great harm reductionist here. He said from an AA meeting, he said, I've seen people come into this program, and from what I can tell, do absolutely every single thing possible that they could and still get high. And I've also
Yeah.
seen people come in here and do next to nothing and stay sober for 30 plus years.
Yeah.
So there doesn't seem to be, I mean, of course we want to try everything there, but there doesn't seem to be a lot of rhyme and reason. But what we can measure is Narcan stopping an overdose so that
This
somebody
is
has a
true.
choice. Right. We can measure recovery as a broader term than just 100% abstinence. And I think it's important to reclaim that word. The majority of people, I think, see, while you and me have had success with abstinence and are happy and joyous and free and rocketed to the fourth dimension and all of these wonderful things, that there are other people out there that don't want to hear about that. They just want to get through the day without
Yeah,
shooting
yeah.
dope or taking a drink.
Yeah, I mean, days can be even been, I always tell people, man, it's a fucking grind. Sometimes, look, shit ain't right, and the best you can do is just get through the day. Get up, go to work, do your thing. Don't punch a wall if you can help it, even punch a wall if you have to. But and then get to bed. That's it. And
And maybe, and for you and me, that's true. Somebody else, the best they can do is go and get a clean needle and a testing strip before they get high.
that's it. That's what they got. But anyway, here I want to talk about. You mentioned harm reduction. Tell me about harm reduction. Well, I think you've explained it, but I'd like to hear more in depth about where you're at.
I I had an AA sponsor whose name was Christopher Abert. Uh, we lost him last year, and when I met Chris, he was 20 plus years sober and completely abstinent in AA,
Yeah.
and he was a hardcore big book thumping guy.
Mm-hmm.
What I would learn later was that he was also riding around on a bicycle illegally distributing clean needles and Narcan to addicts in the small college town of Bloomington, Indiana.
Yep.
That turned into a truck that he would drive around, and he had cooking kits and, clean crack and meth pipes and testing strips and, Narcan and other solutions, and information and
Just trying to
resources.
keep people alive rather than dead.
Right, and he used to say sometimes at the end of an AA meeting, "We can do a lot more for the still sick and suffering than a moment of silence."
Yeah.
Now,
Good
there were
point.
periods of time from when I met Chris and until, 5 years ago when I was absolutely unwilling to come back to AA.
Yeah. I don't blame you.
I wasn't ready to be fully abstinent. I didn't wanna hear it. I didn't wanna hear about God. I
Yeah.
didn't wanna
Fuck
hear
it.
about
Fuck
any
it.
of
Fuck
that.
it. Fuck it. Just all of it.
Right. And Chris was there for me, and he was there for my wife, and he was non-judgmental, and we say in AA, love and tolerance is our code. We call each other friends and brother, and we say we love you, and then one of us starts smoking pot or relapses on something heavier, and then all of a sudden we don't wanna talk to them anymore.
Yeah.
That
That.
person's toxic, that
Yeah.
person's a threat to our to our survival.
They went out.
That
They went out, meaning they're no
they went out.
longer. They're no longer here.
In. Right, exactly. And that language was very harmful to me coming back. But my wife wanted to keep me alive. I guess there was a part of me that wanted to stay alive, and Chris definitely wanted me to stay alive. So he, helped us through that time period where I was, smoking pot or occasionally going out and smoking crack again, and would be on the phone with me and saying, things, just simple things like, "Hey, are you drinking water?" Right? And do you think is it possible that maybe you could get some Valium or some Xanax and get some sleep, right? And just little things like that that kept me alive during that time period. So even though 5 years ago on September 20th, I had a spiritual experience, and that brought me back to AA, and I've had a tremendous success in a wonderful community and a
Your
fellowship for AA.
your spiritual experience was pretty profound because I heard you talk about it, and tell the folks about that. I think it was just very the way well stated the way you brought it up.
Forgiveness. It's forgiveness. I felt forgiveness, and I felt love, and those were things that I was not even aware that I didn't have for myself. I think that on some level, I had thought that that I was okay with me, and I really wasn't. I had written songs about how I wasn't okay with me, and I think that there were things that I was really mad about at myself, like for example, for getting high again after 12 years of abstinence. And, that alone, AA and sobriety had become so much of my identity
Yeah, yeah,
that when that happened, it was really hard for me to get back. And I think I looked at the 12 years as sort of like a black belt or an award, you know what I
yeah,
mean? And
yeah,
instead of a way of life, right? And, in AA, there's a 9-step promise that says, no matter how far down the scale we have gone, we can see how our experience will benefit others.
it will.
And part of that spiritual experience was on day one realizing that it didn't matter. The 12 years that I had, it didn't go anywhere. It was just part of an experience and that someday if I could get it together, that I could take everything, jail and all the people I had hurt, and my mother, my brother, my wife, all the people, the career that I had thrown away 3 times, right? That all of that stuff could be beneficial. It could be ammunition. In fact, that I was anointed
Yeah,
in a way that I could reach certain people that felt as hopeless as me, or as unforgivable as I felt. Now, I received all of this in a burning bush kind of moment that was during the first day of withdrawal. Uh, and that moment, I've had to nurture ever since, so that it doesn't go away. The mind likes to tell us things like that aren't real.
yeah. Here, here.
They may be real. It might be real for a year or so, like an ayahuasca trip, and
Yeah,
then
yeah,
after that, you sort of kind of, forget about it. Oh well, that was some good ayahuasca,
yeah, yeah,
right? But
yeah.
it's something I've had to nurture, and I've done that, through a few simple rules, right? Trust God, clean house, and help others. Okay,
Yeah,
so
yeah, it's pretty
that's
straight
that's
up.
been it. Yeah, but yeah, that experience came for me. It was an experience that fell definitely under a Christian heading, but as a Christian, I get in a lot of arguments with other Christians because I don't believe that that is the only way to the
Yeah, yeah.
truth.
Well, thank
And,
you.
and there's a lot of things in that book that I love. I do. I
Yeah,
love it, that I don't agree with. And there's a lot of things in that book that they like to point out that I'm wrong for, that they're wrong for something
yeah,
else in the
yeah,
book,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
And
It's a
so
boomerang, it comes back at you. It comes all of us, you know.
So I struggle with it, but the fact of to get a little weird on you because it's fun for
Please
the
do.
listener, but the reality is I believe deeply and 100% certainly in evil. And I
Oh
I
yeah,
believe I believe in an intelligent force outside of myself. Okay? So really theistic, right?
yeah, yeah, and
Very non-Buddhist, right?
yeah,
I
yeah,
believe there's a guy. I believe there's a devil. I believe that. So it was amazing that I didn't believe in the opposition, right? Or the big guy that was being opposed. I didn't believe in that. Now I do. Now you could argue from a Jungian or a Joseph Campbell standpoint that these were, the creations of my psyche from growing up watching movies like The Exorcist and my mother throwing me in and out of different churches, Catholic, Episcopal, Protestant, etc., that all of this was imprinted on me at a young age, and I just interpreted the world this way. And I would accept that argument. But I would also tell you from a Jungian standpoint, or from a standpoint of Aleister Crowley, the great occultist, that it doesn't matter. That these are my archetypes that work for me functioning in the world in a particular way. Now, at the same time, I can still believe those are 100% real. And that's what people have a problem with.
Well, we could go on and on forever with this stuff because I'm all into Aristotelian, Platonic, Stoicism, empiricism. I like you. The problem with my brain is it just wants to dig and dig and dig, and sometimes it's like, all right, dude, you got a job. Let's just go out and sell some shit and make some money and take care of your kids.
It'd be nice.
Yeah, are they? Is the tree really the tree, or is there a perfect tree? I don't fucking know, but I do know. Let's just try not to chop it down. So here goes the question. Here goes the question.
Yeah.
This is my question. And maybe we're approaching a close, but maybe because this could go on dangerously long. Oh boy. But anyway, here's a question I was asked, right? Here's the question. Do you know you're there? Do you know you are there? That from an objective outside point, you are there. And here's the next question.
Okay.
Do you believe that you could grow to the point that you would be comfortable just sitting there?
Well, I'm certainly not there. Okay.
Here.
And I'm glad. I'm glad I'm not there. Not because I don't want to be there.
Yeah.
but because I'm human, and I am the one thing I love about being human, and this is a very kind of Christian thing, is it continues to bring me back to my knees asking for help.
But then let me dig a little deeper. That would be there. So now I got you in a trap.
I'm not saying it though. You said it. I didn't say it.
Yeah, because here was my answer to the dude. No. And no, I mean,
That's the short answer.
The short answer.
That's the best one.
Yeah. Do you know you're there? No. Do you think you could be happy sitting in there? No. But that's a pretty trippy concept to think, are you just happy being there?
I think that the only purpose to life is to grow closer to God. I do believe that. And I think you can define that in a number of ways, okay? And I would be comfortable myself listening to several different definitions and saying yes, okay? But that is the only point that I see to any of this. What is this? What is this body incarnate talking on a computer screen to you? What is all of this? Right? This is absolutely 100% a video game.
Yeah.
Okay. And so if I'm not questioning the reality of this particular matrix, then I'm doing it all wrong, right?
Yeah.
I need to be asking questions.
Endlessly. Okay, so now, before we get to your performance, why did you do what you did, and and how? But I think you have a pretty quick answer to that. But why did you do it, and how did you do it? I think that's been answered, but
I just lived long enough to get bored with drugs and alcohol, and my own ideas about how to live life. Period. That's it. I didn't do anything for that to happen. I was just lucky. Some of my friends, and I'm sure many of yours, didn't make it.
Nope.
And because of that, I try to stay grateful and active.
Yep.
And that's it. I did nothing. I did nothing. By doing nothing, I mean, I got to a place though where I did start listening to other people a little bit, right? Right.
Little, just a teeny bit. And now you're going to give us a little something on the harmonica?
Yeah, I'll give you a pretty song.
Good. Please do.
A very very sacred one.
Okay.
Down here in New Orleans, we have a group of people, a culture called the Mardi Gras Indians,
Uh-huh.
and they are black folks. They are descended from black folks that escaped slavery here in New Orleans and ran into the swamps and in hopes of getting away. And in doing so, were exposed to the potential of being eaten by a bear or a cougar or an alligator or diseases and insects. And they made this decision that their living was so horrible that they
It
were
was
going to
worth
try
it was just worth it. Screw
worth
it.
it. During that time, some of them met up with, indigenous First Nation, Native American people here, and those people took them in and gave them food and shelter, and they married into, so to speak, into the tribe. Later, when slavery was, you know, changed names,
Yeah,
they
exactly.
they brought the tradition and the culture of, those Indian tribes back to the city of New Orleans, and every year, on Mardi Gras, they go out with these suits that they've worked on all year sewing, these immensely elaborate beaded suits, and they engage in, mock warfare with each other and the celebration of real Native American culture mixed with the Black experience, paying homage to these Indians, as they call them, who saved them. So there's a song that they play that is a prayer, and the first line in the song is in patois, a mix of French and Cajun and Indian, and it's loosely translated into the wilderness, like
Ooh,
you said,
yeah.
anything better. So this is the song, it's called "My Indian Red," and I play it with permission
Ooh,
from the Indians because
cool.
it's really not for me, right? But the message, I believe, is the most beautiful when I say that the only thing in life that we're here to do is to grow closer to God. That is certainly a journey that is into the wilderness.
Yeah, yeah. Wow. Thank you. Hey, where do you play next?
Doing a month-long tour, in March up on the entire Northeast. You can, check out the band at, www.jasonriccimusic.com or mooncat.org. Either will bring you to the same place.
Hey, well, Jason, thank you so much. Been great meeting
My
you.
absolute pleasure.
Thank you for listening to The Mark Howley Show. If you found this story as intriguing as we did, give us a like, share the episode, and subscribe at The Mark Howley Show. New episodes every other Friday. Adios.